Hey everybody, Damian Broussard here from CE Kilts. Welcome. I hope you're having a really great day today. This is going to be such a fun interview. Andrew and I have been looking forward to this all week. I have my best friend here all the way from Dallas, Texas. I'm in Louisiana. Andrew's coming all the way from Dallas, Texas, Mr. Andrew Lyon, co-founder of CE Kilts. And we have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful show for you tonight. We have Mr. Guy Perota, who is here with us with Miss Jane. And they are two amazing people who do some amazing things in the film industry. And guys, we're going to let you introduce yourselves before we get to some really important questions that we'd love to ask you.
Great. Yeah, I'm Jane Ferguson, co-producer, writer, and director on Voices Over the Water documentary.
Oh, wow. What else did you want to say about yourself?
And then I also work as an assistant director in mainstream film and television, mainly television these days.
And I was reading the list.
There's a writer's strike, so you know.
I was reading the listing. There's some impressive shows there on that listing, Jane.
I've been very lucky, lucky. Yeah, I got in the Directors Guild assistant director training program, and so they place you in things, and those assistant directors teach you what they know. And I can honestly say I learned from some of the best. I've been very lucky.
Fantastic.
Awesome. And Guy, how about you?
Yes, Damian. I've done PBS programs mostly on topics that I think are important that people know about. You know, really pleasant things that fun topics such as genocide and things like that. And I don't mean to be tongue-in-cheek on that.
But to say great bedtime stories right there.
Exactly. But in all seriousness, genocide, in history, for example, between Puritans and native cultures and then Celts and the Gallic-speaking people. But I don't mean to be arrogant and put it lightly, but some of the hardships, but also a lot of the musical traditions that come out of it in the language, the Gallic language, which is very important. So anyway, that's my background, PBS documentaries, and also shark conservation efforts and media. And I also do consultations for other people's movies. When they need experts for their topics, I'll find them and put them in, things like that. But not Law and Order or 30 Rock like Jane.
Wow.
Oh, wow. I know, right? I got a little bit nervous when I heard you were going to be on, Jane. I was like, man, I've seen a lot of those shows. That's amazing. I had a little bit of starstruckness there for a second.
She get to see our fantastic 8x5 studio and be like, no, that's okay. You guys got
it. Right.
There's absolutely no glamour in the film industry. That's the first thing to say. Absolutely no glamour whatsoever. This is probably the most glamorous thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
So.
I get a very, very super small piece of it. My daughter does musicals, does local community theater, and she does, and she's actually auditioning tonight for the musical Matilda.
Oh,
and
so
she is actually she's actually doing that right now. So
let us know how she does. Let us know how she does. We would love to hear how she's doing.
Absolutely, this will be her third one. She did a production of Newsies, King of New York. And then and she's done Frozen, and then this will be her third Matilda. So hopefully she'll get the lead part that she's auditioning for tonight. So y'all have a really great documentary coming out. What's the name of that documentary? Tell everybody what you're doing there.
Voices Over the Water. So with a lot of documentaries like this we intended to be educational, but also a fun journey along the way, and eye-opening with gorgeous scenics and music. Voices Over the Water has to do with where we give voice to those who can no longer, people who are no longer with us from centuries ago, people who are involved with the Highland clearances and Culloden and so on, and also people who are enslaved. But we're also giving tribute to a Jacobite toast that you gentlemen might know about called Over the Water.
The King Over the Water.
The King Over the Water, to be exact. So it's a double entendre there. that's what we're doing there.
Maybe this would be a good time for people to see the trailer, guys. We got a minute and a half of a trailer. It'll mute us while we do this, guys. Just kind of a warning. But let's take a look at the trailer for Voices Over the Water, so y'all all know what we're talking about, and there'll be more to come right afterwards.
This is the land of murder and mayhem.
Savage, heathen, outlandish people. They spoke a different language. They wore funny dress.
When you dig a little deeper with most people, they can tell you what their family myths and legends are.
Whether you've been torn away from them or voluntarily you've left.
The sense of belonging to something somewhere else is very, very important to Americans.
I don't think there's anything wrong with people wanting to display their pride and dress up in regalia.
Who doesn't smile when they see a man in a kilt?
As long as you know the difference between fact and fiction.
There were dreadful accounts of cruelties.
This is the advancement of civilization. Grand sport for demons in human form.
The only idea of tradition is as if it serves the now.
If they had the big picture, would it change how they celebrate?
We're a very loving, loyal people, but if we really were true to our roots, we would cut their throats.
That last quote, man alive, that's a heavy statement.
Yes.
And, you know,
and who doesn't smile when they see a man in a kilt, right?
I know, right?
Oh, we're smiling.
Yes, she is. Yeah.
Most people do.
So,
I mean, I'm wearing mine.
Yeah.
So, guys, what led y'all to pursue this subject?
Years ago, when I was working on a documentary on what many have called the first declared war in America, the Pequot War, 1637, I remember thinking at the time how, wow, this sounds a lot like the Highland clearances, some of the trials and tribulations that the Gallic-speaking people had. And I remember thinking, wow, eventually that might make a nice, interesting project. And then many decades later, Jane had a book, and I'll let you tell it.
Yeah, I was reading kind of an important book, actually. So called The Highland Clearances by John Preble, who wrote it in the 60s. And it was sort of at a time when Scottish nationalism was beginning to crystallize and that the Scottish National Party was beginning to form. So it's sort of told from a fairly left-wing, almost socialist perspective. So the landlords don't come off very well, but, there's two sides to every story. But I read that book, glued, couldn't stop, real page turner. I had no idea. And, my grandfather was a Scot. I don't believe our family was cleared, but I don't really know. But growing up in England, we don't learn this history. And what we discovered talking to people is that if you don't grow up in Scotland, there are many people of Scottish descent who just don't know these stories.
Yeah. And we also discovered, too, that there were a number of challenges in depicting what was a basic story of man's inhumanity to man. How do we do that and be apolitical? Because we just really feel that we just want to, in our own small way, to try to bring people together. What we found was people questioning, like with my last name, even though I'm part Scottish descent, and Jane, who sounds English, who's Scottish descent as well. We ought to be able to depict the story of man's inhumanity to man, but some may say, well, you need to be from Scotland and so on. But we came across people who didn't necessarily feel that way. We just thought it was important to tell this story anyway. And from our point of view as Americans, also as immigrants, Jane is a person who was an American citizen. I'm an
immigrant.
She is an American citizen, proud to say.
Yeah.
But we wanted to be apolitical on all this as well, because during the course of the making of this, we found that when we were covering Scottish descendants in the diaspora, wonderful, beautiful people, Scottish identity meant something different in all the different, many different geographic locations. For example, Northern California, we came across some people that they were different about their thoughts of Scottish identity to North Carolina, or Maine, or New York City, or Long Island and Kearney, New Jersey, or South Africa, or Jamaica, and so on, just to name some of the places. So we didn't want to be political about it, though some people were trying to make it a political thing, but we stayed as neutral as possible, to be as objective as possible, and just depict the Americans' point of view in a variety of flavors. Yeah. You see a cross-section kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think we discovered as well, doing this, that although much of the documentary talks about Scottish culture, Scottish identity, it's also really about American identity.
Yes.
Because most people in America take some pride in celebrating their ethnic origins, whether it's Polish, Irish, German, Scottish, whatever it is.
Or all the above.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And many people are, more than one, and they, have to make decisions about, well, it's St. Patrick's Day. Do I get my shamrock and my green stuff out and put the tartan away? Wait till tartan day for that. We're all a mixture. We're all a mixture. So this documentary actually has something to say about American identity and why it is that Americans are not just American. It's not enough to have that national identity, that you need an ethnic identity as well. And I think this is something that people in Europe particularly don't understand about America.
And not to forget the Gaelic-speaking people, which is a form of indigeneity and indigenous culture that a lot of people think to say one to be indigenous means a particular other set of criteria, but just to be indigenous could be one friend of mine who wrote a book called Whiteness of a Different Color. For example, there's you could do something on Gaelic-speaking people that we should never forget about them as well. A few gentlemen you may have, if you go to Nova Scotia, for example, and there's a very strong living culture, of course, as well as in Scotland of the Gaels. So they're not forgotten.
Absolutely.
That is a lot of answer and a lot to delve through. I'm going to be thinking about everything you just said for quite a while.
I'm sorry, Andrew.
No, I think that's fantastic. And it's funny because Damien and I, we probably are front lines on questions of these natures, or of what your documentary is hitting, directly. And I probably anybody who owns a kilt company or something of that nature has these questions all the time. I get questions a lot, hey, I really like the way that these look. I want to dress properly. I also don't have any Scottish ancestry, so I probably am not allowed. A lot of these things come up, and
yes.
I'm one of the first to point out, hey, there's a registry of tartans and there is a national tartan of Mexico. So let's work around, some of the things. But to that end, I think that it's neat that it was, you must have learned some crazy things, either stories or tidbits of information that stuck with you. Is there any surprising things that you learned during the production that just, stuck with you? You want to share? Or, hey, I don't want to spoil anything. If there's spoilers, we don't want to hit that.
A lot of it's a great and very important question. And really hitting home from some of our academic advisors, Michael Newton, for example, a Gaelic scholar, of why you can't eat stereotyping. Of course, we all knew the making of the stereotypes of not just the Scottish American Harry Lauder and so on, but we do cover him and also the fat bastard who I drink with, but that's a stereotype. We do want to cover stereotypes in general, but the Michael Newton, who discusses the importance of Gaelic, the Gaels, that they're constantly being buried in history. That was very eye-opening to keep coming across people who did not look like people that we would have initially thought were Scottish descent. For example, Rhiannon Giddens, who the recent Pulitzer Prize winning singer and poet, gave us a song for this. And she's of mixed race and ethnicities, as our Ernest Gilchrist, one of our fabulous interviews, who is descended of enslaved African Americans, but he also counts Scottish Americans as his blood. So it was just very eye-opening to see that.
Wow.
I think as well, one of the things early on that I had no idea about, that we heard over and over again, is the link between the cattle drovers in the Highlands, and how this was cattle droving was how they made money to pay their rent.
Yeah.
And many of these people left in the Highland clearances and became cowboys. I mean, what is more iconically American than the cowboy?
Yes.
And this is something that many of them were of Highland descent. The Chisholm Trail, Chisholm, right there. Good Scots name.
The funny story that when I would speak, my grandma, her name Constance Ross, I would ask her. I would ask Dad and her of our family stories, and they would both in a way to we stole a lot of cows. A lot of cow thieving was in our heritage, apparently.
Yeah, I know. And one of our historians, or somebody in it, no, it's somebody down south, says that people think that it's all sheep in Scotland, but it wasn't. It was cattle, and the sheep were part of, as you know, the clearances.
What's more iconic in the Highlands, a sheep or sheep or a Highland cow? You know?
Oh yeah, those lovely cows with their big horns and shaggy coats. So lovely.
I know the thing for me, you speak of stereotypes, and watching the trailer for the documentary that you're doing and hearing you speak about the stereotypes, I can't help but think about my own heritage with that. Being Cajun and watching movies, it makes me cringe most times, because we don't all sound like the water boy, or the coach from the water boy. However, some of us may get close. But and hearing you speak about Nova Scotia, we have strong ties with the Cajun culture in Nova Scotia. I mean, there are many, many similarities. And there's actually been some individuals and some academics in Louisiana that have done extensive research on the Cajun culture, actually connecting the Cajun culture to Celtic culture. And because many Cajuns came from Brittany, France, which we all know is actually one of the Celtic nations. So one thing that I was very interested in with your documentary is there's a large variety of music in the film. I noticed that, and for me, being a Celtic Cajun, basically, because I have both in my family. I have Mac Thomas and Stewart and Cranston and Gordon in my family line, and then the Broussard line, the French line, which is very strong. So when I listen to Scottish music, Celtic music, Irish music, and then I listen to Cajun music, there's a lot of the same instruments, there's a lot of the same rhythms, there's a lot of the same everything. So the connection is very easy to make. So in y'all's documentary, what does the large variety of music say about the diaspora, that y'all did the documentary on?
I think it shows the Scottish diaspora is very diverse. Number one, very diverse, of races and ethnicity. And one very eye-opening thing, which we knew a little bit about before in the history, was some of the Scottish immigrants at first didn't always identify as Scottish or Highland or Gaelic, and sometimes they sided with the British in the Revolutionary War. That was fairly shocking. And then at other times, when I guess it's sometimes cool to be Scottish, some people would claim, oh. And then a lot of our founding fathers and American presidents, sometimes they would be very proud to be American Scottish in history. And other times, well, I guess last year I said I was more Irish or English. yeah, I guess I'm also Scottish, a kind of thing we saw over the years, going back centuries. I'm not being political and just historical here. So that was eye-opening for race and identity and what it meant to be American as well. And that we're still digging up stuff all the time. People are constantly sending us stuff about their ancestry, and where some people are uncomfortable meeting their enslavers, for example. And maybe some people don't want to be identified as any one or two or three things. I mean, we're all part of the human race kind of thing. That's eye-opening as well. We did some shooting at a place called the Institute for American Indian Studies. Right. And we did a comparison of for example, the Cherokee people with some of the Gales, and that's eye-opening, the parallels left and right. And if you go to North Carolina and Georgia, we came across many people who had so many stories to tell of all this. But the short answer, every time we kept going around and shooting interviews, like the front line that Andrew was talking about, you gentlemen probably have much more experience than we do with that. Maybe we should do a part 2 with you guys. But anyway, every time we went to the front lines, we kept coming across people that the copy, we were neutral, of course. And because we just want to get the truth. Documentary does have opinion. It's not news or journalism. So, but anyway, right. If, for example, if we would go to one set of games, Highland Games, and in certain geographical areas, we thought we would have one particular answer that kept being repeated. We've done like 1,800 interviews, and we were astonished at how many people were diverse in their own backgrounds and willing to discuss a truth that is more painful to hear at times. For example, the gentleman, Andrew, you were talking about at the end of that trailer, that is that man, a wonderful guy, Frank Vance, who for a number of years was one of the leaders of Grandfather Mountain Highland Games.
Oh, yeah.
And he's an educator himself. And that comment that he made, we don't lead people to give these answers. We don't even appear on camera. We give them the question often in advance. And he was very truthful and forthright, being very proud of the culture and so on and the traditions. But he said, truthfully, if we discussed our history and we went and met the historic Highland chiefs, we'd cut their throats. Just really eye-opening to us. So, yeah. And by the way, I wanted to add, I know I'm talking too much, but I wanted to add that the man.
That's what this is for.
Oh, cool. The man who coined the term documentary is John Grierson, Scottish. And he said documentaries were, quote, a unique art form in a way for people to perceive reality. So he didn't mean them as news or journalists, though while Jane and I are not looking to deceive anyone in any shape or fashion, by no means. That's why we have a broadly based advisory board to keep it balanced. But we definitely were allowed to go into more of the music like you were talking about, Damien. For example,
so cool.
If we go to North Carolina, we mostly expected, we would hear pipes, we'd hear fiddle, which we did, all this wonderful stuff, and harp. But we also came across Gaelic singers who were African descent and really wonderful. And then there were Cherokee people who gave us wonderful music. And then Charles David Denler, who I've worked with before, Emmy-winning composer, did all the original compositions there. And then we went to Martha's Vineyard and captured Kate Taylor and James Taylor's renditions of Auld Lang Syne, and
fantastic.
And then we have Runrig, of course. And then we have
lots of Scottish bands.
Oh, delightful.
Skippinish.
Yeah.
I saw in the credits on the trailer Gordon Duncan, and I'm like, what did you pull from Gordon? Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. Yeah, he I guess he's no longer with us, but the track that we used is very long. And
everything he did was and complicated. Lord have mercy. It's crazy stuff.
Yeah, somebody said to me that there's a lot of criticism about trying to modernize bagpipes, electric bagpipes, adding rock instruments to it, that kind of thing, that it's not purist. And he this particular track was his sort of, thumbing up to them, like, let me show you.
Right.
And it's the most compulsive piece of music. It's got a phenomenal beat.
I can't wait to hear that.
When you want to add some pace to have something like that. It sounds Scottish, distinctly Scottish, because of the bagpipes. And it starts off very simply, and like many good musical pieces, becomes more complex as it goes on. Would that we had hours and hours that we could play the whole track on the documentary. Sadly, we don't. But that was a real gem. Very happy to find that.
Funny story.
I also saw.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Andrew. I also saw somebody that was very near and dear to me on there. He has no idea he's near and dear to me, but he is. I saw you had Brian Cox in there, and the reason why Brian is so special to me is he has strong connections with my alma mater. He's got strong connections with the University of Dundee. Which I received a bachelor's degree from in 2008. I'm super proud of that. And Brian Cox has strong connections to the university. So when I saw him in there, I kind of pumped my fist. I was like, yes, got Brian in there.
Very, very proud of his connections with Dundee in particular. He was the Grand Marshal of the Tartan Day Parade, and was gracious enough to carve out a moment to give us an interview. So
and speaking of this year's Tartan Day Parade, we got the chance to march in it, and you briefly mentioned part 2. If that ever happens, you need to write down a note, because sometime in the last 3 months there was a major flame war on Twitter, between Ali Piper and some guy. I don't know who it was. Not that guy, but some guy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you fell into this, but it was actually really funny because, Ali, talking about music and pipes and progressiveness, we went to her concert, which was phenomenal. Okay, you should hear my wife talk about it. She didn't think she was going to enjoy it, and she enjoyed every moment of that concert. But there was a bit of a flame war because she played a little Metallica, and somebody said, pipes don't belong in heavy metal. And to which somebody replied back with, you don't know what you're talking about. It happened to be, I believe, Lars from Metallica. Yeah. And the guy was arguing with Metallica about the possibility of pipes.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the wonderful gifts of music, is that it is constantly being reinvented, that every generation takes what went on before and adds their own twist. And we're living in an age where you do have electronic instruments. You can plug in and you can be loud, and you can be live in the same town as a phenomenal percussionist and come from a tradition of stringed instruments and combine the two and plug it in and add a beat and off you go. And I think that's reflected in modern Scottish music. We saw it this year at the Ceilidh and the after parade party in New York. They had bands from Scotland who do exactly that, and the crowd were going nuts, and there were thousands of people there having a great time. So and when you look at there's a big debate about how much did Scottish music influence American folk music,
oh my gosh,
Appalachian, bluegrass, all that kind of stuff. But the fact is that they took the instrumentation that the settlers had in those areas and added from other cultures, whether it was Sweden or France or somewhere like that. There were slaves with the drums, and the banjo was created and incorporated. And it's hard to imagine what country music would be without a banjo.
I'll make a shout out to my favorite new podcast, Gary West. If you're ever watching, please, hey, I'd love to talk to you, man. But I want to say it was like the 5th episode or something where they were about to do a Eurovision. So he did a Eurovision of bagpipes, and to find all the different bagpipes that are across the world. Unbelievable podcast. It was some of it I could do without, but it was neat to know it exists.
we need to look into that. That's a great point too. Like the variations of dispelling the stereotypes, the variations of even bagpipe instrument.
I mean, I'm sure that the bagpipes themselves got notoriety because they went to the front of an army.
Yeah,
200 years, right?
Yeah.
So
considered a weapon of war.
Yeah.
Instrument,
yeah.
And the same with the Victorian love of tartan and things like that, and military.
Yeah, we get into some of the military appropriation of Highland culture,
Which goes back a long way. It's not just a current thing that people can try to attack us on. We're not trying to be political, but people have been talking about that for a real long time, about the borrowing and cherry picking of Highland culture and just in messing with it in some ways. Now, we're not looking to condemn in our thing at all, but a few centuries ago, somebody was doing different things, or Victorian era, and people are borrowing this and that, and hopefully they can get it right, or try to at least.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fact and fiction out there.
Well, you started touching on a bit of a question that's been running around in my mind. So you're talking a little about the military and some of that other stuff, but I guess Highlandism. How does the subject of that reflect on the interest of people today? I guess especially in the U.S., but I mean that's the whole point of this, right?
Mostly, yes. Just the idea is that we're not condemning anyone who wants to celebrate these cultures, of course. But there are people who just feel it's important, and we do agree with this, that just know some of the origins and the histories involved in, for example, tartanry and Highlandism and all that. Now, a lot of people, there's a lot of fans of Braveheart and so on, but as I know that you gentlemen know this, where it doesn't really depict. Whenever I do a mullet and blueface, people giggle at me in the street every week when I attempt that. But that's not exactly William Wallace stuff going down there, and you know that. So.
People are often shocked to find out that there were no Highland bagpipes in that movie. It was all Irish. It was all the Uilleann pipes.
Where they filmed it, shot it in Ireland. It's amazing.
Yes.
So guys, I know that we've been doing interviews for a while now. We're still kind of new to it, but we've done quite a few. And I know even with the ones that we've done, there's always been kind of one or two interviews and responses that has kind of stuck out in my mind. During this process of filming this documentary, what was the most shocking response that you had when conducting interviews? Like, what's the one response that you had that really sticks out in your mind?
I guess I have to, when I was asked that at the Directors Guild of America Theater back in May, same question, amazingly. What's the most shocking answer? I guess, to be truthful, it's, oh boy, we'll do it, right?
Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, go on.
The most shocking answer was, as I mentioned in May, most shocking answer to our question was, on a good day, lipstick.
And Guy, what was the question?
And the question was, what does a Scotsman wear under his kilt?
Oh, that question.
Yes. But it was shocking to us because it's intended for PBS, and we had to alter some of that. I guess now, is it okay?
I would imagine you did. Yeah.
That question is funny.
Andrew, I've lost count. I've lost count of how many times I've been asked that question.
All the time.
Well, we're a little more free to talk on YouTube than we are on PBS, I would assume. But what's funny to me is I see the question asked to Scots, and they handle it. They handle it much differently than I think we do, and I also see a major I want to use the word bell curve, but I don't know if that's right. Just a curve over time, because when we find a new kiltie, somebody with the desire and the want to do it, and of course Damien and I are always proponents of learning the culture and the history first, and then going forward. But they're always excited for that question in the beginning. So it's a fun question, and then after a month or 2 months or a year or 2 years, you get really kind of tired of that question, especially here in the U.S.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
I see people ask the Scots, and the Scots are like, "Oh, yeah," and they're like, "Nothing," and they're just screaming it out. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to get to that point because, you know, I'm like, if I asked that question, I'd go to jail. You know, that's really okay. But
boots and socks, lad. Boots and socks.
Yeah, nothing was worn.
Yeah,
everything's in working order. You know, the jokes can come like crazy, but I find Americans handle it differently. They start out with it being funny. They go to it being annoying. And I think at some point you get to this place where you're just like, yeah, that question's coming. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And not to discount your very important question. I mean, it was constantly eye-opening for us, even though we delved into, we had a great advisory board straight down the line. And the massive reading body of literature that we delved into was wonderful. In in-person interviews and looking at historical documents and Gaelic language. But it is always eye-opening to hear how some people will hold on, and I believe I understand it. Some of the pain from the Highland clearances, very brutal time, which went on for some say 100 years or so. But the consistency and just how long it kept going on and on and on, and that's eye-opening. I'm a patriot, so I'm by no means knocking Americans, but I am surprised that more of us don't know of some of these histories of the Scottish people. I think we kind of ought to, because there's so many different reasons. We could do one kind of history where you can write a book on something like how every Scot walks on water, or, you know, things like that. That's the only, they're gods and goddesses, and just deify them. But why not do something more accurate too? Yeah, can talk about the contributions that Scottish people have contributed to the whole world, of course,
absolutely,
and America, but also not be afraid, because many Scottish people are very strong on education, as you guys know. And it's very important to be educated and delve into things, but the whole truth. Like, not every Scottish immigrant was, some of them sided with the British at one point, or some of them didn't want to be known as Scots. And
not to be afraid of the inconvenient truth as well.
Yeah. Well put.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's right.
But I also think some of people not knowing about the Highland clearances also stems from those people not talking about their experiences and not telling the next generation, and wanting them to, you know, assimilate into this new country and, you know, align themselves with something different where they have power and where, you know, that kind of thing can't happen. And so, you know, we're at a time now where people don't shut up about their experiences. And, you know, there's no way you're not going to tell your kids what you went through. I know I can go on for hours about all the difficulties I had immigrating to this country and all the reasons why I left, blah, blah, blah. And it's weird to think that thousands of people came over and never talked about it. You know, so I think that that's some of that in the history as well.
I'm so happy to see y'all really focusing on Gaelic speaking.
Thank you.
That is something, again, near and dear to me, because as recently as the 1940s and 50s, the Cajun speaking people in Louisiana, if you spoke Cajun in 1940, 1950, and you were in school, you got whipped with a ruler across your knuckles because you had to speak English. You could not speak French. And what that's done from 1940 to now 2023, the Cajun French language is nearly dead. And Gaelic is running into the same issue. I'm happy to see there are some schools in Scotland right now that are bringing that back. And to see someone like y'all talking about it so heavily in your documentary really makes me feel good.
We should put you in touch with Michael Newton, who has his own school on. He's delved into this a great deal. He'd love to hear from you. But there's so many people who have great points of view that you never know when they're going to enlighten you on things. For example, Have you gentlemen ever heard of someone named Sarah Keyes?
I know one, yes.
Yes, a wonderful person. She points out how Mad Men, episode of Mad Men, when some guy won't let Pete Campbell's daughter into his school because he's a Mackenzie. And as Sarah points out, that's in the 1960s, 300 years later, that Sarah says. That's a great point.
That is fantastic.
But I think it's part of the British establishment's way of, I don't know if you know, but Britain had an extensive empire. You might have heard of it. And, their modus operandi was to go all over the world and repress local culture and force people to learn English. They would make the laws in English, the courts in English, the newspapers in English. And if you wanted to engage with the establishment and the power base in any way, you had to speak English. So in those circumstances, it's hard to hold on to your language. And I went to university in Wales, and I couldn't get over what a phenomenal job the Welsh have done hanging on to their language and their...
Man, that's a language.
Because every child who goes to school in Wales learns Welsh. So every Welsh person in Wales can speak Welsh. It may not be their first language, but they can all speak it. And when I was there, at 6 o'clock, you get the national news from London, and at 6:30, they'd all go to the regional news. And if you're in Wales, it's in Welsh. And I was sitting there as an English person, not speaking a word of Welsh, for half an hour, watching the local news in a language I can't understand. But now imagine if they'd done that in Scotland with the Gaelic language. If
you can still find some old Gaelic newscasts from pretty high up north. I've seen them and went, wow, I wish I had a clue what they're saying.
They are they're
it's raining today
now. They are making an effort, but it's still not mandatory for Scottish kids all over Scotland to learn Gaelic.
And the Irish seem to have done a pretty good job of revitalizing the language.
Yeah.
There's even TV shows completely in it. Yeah.
Before we get too far into it and start wrapping up, we got to ask the most important questions probably that we've asked all night here. When are people going to be able to see the documentary? Where are they going to be able to see it? And if it's streaming, how do they stream it? Kind of give us all the goods here.
Right now, it is in Choice Film Festivals. This weekend is Providence, Rhode Island. It was at the DGA Theater, Directors Guild of America, in May. And coming up Rhode Island, there'll be some film festivals that we're very happy to share with you as we come across some of them. And it's intended for public broadcasting. So once that happens, we're dying to alert everyone of the dates. If you'd be so kind to accept our update at the time.
Absolutely.
We can send that.
Absolutely. We'll stream it from the rooftops.
Thank you.
I have a bit of a tongue-in-cheek question because it's something that Damien and I come across all the time, and it's a joke kind of to us. But I would assume that if we were part of a film crew asking these questions, there would be a bucket, and we'd have to throw in some cash, and count the words or the seconds or the minutes before somebody has to tell you that they are related to Robert the Bruce or they're a Stewart. Like, I can't tell you how often somebody's like that. I'm like, come on, if you look back 22 generations, that means there's like 20 million people who are also related. It's not that amazing, but you were also like the seventh son of the eighth son of the ninth. There's really no connection.
Generations ago.
Right, yeah.
I think one of our historians gives us a little bit of info about, the clan structures and this question of, is everybody blood related within a clan? And of course, the answer is they're not.
Yeah.
He gives some of the history of that and the why nots.
When I was first
I would imagine, like, my day job, I'm in healthcare. And I would imagine, during that time, we're talking Middle Ages, a little further, the average lifespan, if you made it past your 40s, you were old, So
Right.
there was so many children being orphaned at that time from either a plague or a famine or war or whatever. You know, you had this young lad coming up. Both his parents got killed. You know, the clan chief for whoever, stewards, you know, whatever, would say, "Oh yeah, well, no, you can come on. We'll take care of you now." Bam! Now he's a steward. You know, so it all muddies the water at that point.
Yeah,
You know?
totally. And some other historians get into the whole question of genealogy, that, you know, people look at their DNA and want to use that as a marker of culture, and, you know, they'll do their DNA and discover that actually they're not all Scottish. They've got all this Norse stuff. So does that mean that they're Norse? You know, and no, it doesn't. It means that the Gaels defeated the Norse, and stories of that, and those people became Gaels. And so, you know, what is culture, and what is an American? You know, we're all a bit of a mixture, but we all share something in common.
Exactly.
And
well, and it goes back to what Guy was saying earlier about, you know, we're all part of the human race.
Yeah.
And, you know, some of us just know for a fact that, you know, we've done our family tree and we see these people in our family tree, and we basically choose to be proud of that. You know, we're like, I identify with this. I'm proud of that history, and I feel a deep connection to it. And, you know, I choose to be proud of it, you know, even though we're just all one big mixing pot, and, you know, all part of the same human race.
That's right.
So I guess, you know, Damien was saying, let's, you know, questions before we wrap up. Is there any amazing information that, you know, you just want to throw out there before somebody who's on the fence of going to see this or wanting to see this? Anything you just want to throw at them and say, look, if you watch this, you know, you're going to be finding Knuckle Eevees on 37 minutes in something.
I think that, you know, don't think it's all bagpipes, because it isn't.
Now I'm out.
Conscious decision to show that Scotland is a lot more than just bagpipes and whiskey and stuff like that. It is very musical, and you know, we have a lot of different kinds of music that are influenced.
Yes. And we hope you'll be blown away. The viewer would be blown away by the variety of scenery and things like that.
And we've tried to inject some humor, and, you know, make it entertaining. At the end of the day, you know, not everybody is an academic scholar. We want people to have a good time when they watch it, to come away having learned something, but having been entertained and inspired to learn more for themselves and dig in. Maybe go to Scotland, see what it's all about, go to some games, you know, explore your own ancestry a bit, and you know, and decide for yourself about what happened.
Speaking of scenery, I don't know what will happen if I show some of these pictures, but y'all sent us a couple of pictures, and, you know, talking about scenery, let's see if this mutes us. If you can talk about it, if you want to talk about it, we'll just throw up a couple photos and say, what do we have here?
It's Mull.
Yeah, this is a cleared village on Mull, overlooking the sea, the most beautiful spot. It's quite remote.
And that's going to be in the movie.
Yes. Sir Thomas Devine took us on an expedition there, and we saw the remains there. It's very heartbreaking when you go and you really feel it.
Right. And then there's looks like a castle out, like that's either a really big moat or the landscape has changed.
Have you seen Monty Python?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's Castle Arg.
Is that the one that sunk 4 times and then they keep rebuilding it? Yes. And the guy's running for half an hour.
Right,
yeah.
I've seen that guy, John. Yeah, that's John. Anyway, yes.
But it's also a very serious place where people had been cleared locally, and Castle Stalker is the name of it. And they were very gracious in letting us go there and shoot away.
That's fantastic. I think we have a couple other cool photos. should we know this guy right here?
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie A View to a Kill?
Uh-huh.
I'm a big James Bond fan. He was the groom when he was in his younger days, where Roger Moore interrupts his wedding. But he's an actor. I love James Bond, so I have to give Robert his plug there. But he plays a man named McLeod who was cleared in our reenactments. He was cleared and sets up in a new living situation in Canada. And he's pretty bitter because he's answering to the writings of Harriet Beecher Stowe, who we try to shed light on a new way of looking at her as well in this. And we have someone portraying her as well, Beth Campbell. So we do a give and take, and that's what that face was there. He's angry at her. So. Is
that the lovely lady sitting? Let me see. I think I have that one.
Yes. Yeah.
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 She looks very surprised that you're taking this photo.
Harriet Beecher Stowe, amazingly, was a defender of some of the clearance events. She was supposedly a guest of a countess whose husband was evicting people off their lands in the Highlands to make way for sheep. And Harriet Beecher Stowe was entertained by her, I guess, and was entranced by her and defended her actions.
Well, she was, fed all the lines that people use to justify their inhuman actions.
Yeah.
She stayed in their castle, and she was shown a new village by the sea. She was shown fishing boats where they were encouraged to, instead of doing the traditional way of life of Gallic culture, they were encouraged to develop herring fishery.
Yeah.
And she was shown all these things, look what we've done for the peasants. Isn't this great? Their lives are greatly improved. And she bought it. She never was taken to where they lived before that. She was never shown any of what their lives were like. She probably never actually spoke to any of them, because I'm sure they all spoke Gaelic. And then she wasn't there very long, and went back and reported like a parrot just what she'd been told.
Yeah.
So not very good journalism there, Harriet.
Yeah.
and of the old photos,
sets it to right.
Say again, Andrew.
Of the old photos that we have, that is amazing. What's going on here?
Yeah, so this is from the Highland Archive. It's on it's a croft on the Isle of Skye, and those are crofters. I think this photo is from I want to say it's 1870s, 1880s. So it's quite late on in the clearances. They're not wearing kilts as we know them today. They're crofting is, even today, is an incredibly hard way of life. It basically means that you rent the piece of land and you farm it, but it's not enough to produce what you need to sustain life on for your family. You have to do more than one thing. So you might have some animals, you might be able to grow some crops, but you're also going to have to fish. These days, it's about internet business. I'm a big knitter, and there are crofters on Shetland and Fair Isle who raise sheep to make wool for the main Shetland wool supplier. But on the side, they're dinner ladies at the school. They run the post office. They've all got about 3 jobs, and they barely get by.
Wow.
And that's what crofting is. It sounds romantic, but I think it's hard for people who make a living on the land.
We went across a number of archives across the world: American South, New York City, New Jersey, California, New England, but also in Scotland, of course. A wonderful shout out to a man named Jamie who gave us a lot of those fabulous pictures.
Yeah.
Everyone should look into his work of digging things for us. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Guy, Jane, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for meeting with us. We really appreciate it. Our hope is that we can do our small part in helping to support this documentary. and spreading the word and, getting as many people to view it as we can. So I hope that our small part helps.
We're very appreciative.
Yes, thank you very much. It's been really nice.
A blessing
Really,
to be with
pleasure.
you, gentlemen. Wonderful.
So for the viewers out there, if we get any links to any videos or anything like that, we're going to post them in the comments. As always, check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can catch all of these awesome interviews and amazing content that we're going to bring your way, Kilt and Scottish and Celtic related. Check out our website at www.cekilts.com for your next wool kilt or acrylic kilt. All of our wool kilts come from either Lacaran or Strathmore Mills, straight from Scotland. Yeah. So if you're interested in that, please get a hold of us. So as always, Andrew, my brother, I will see you soon.
Yeah.
And it's been great. Guy, Jane, thank you so much for meeting with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Till next time, gentlemen.
Thank you.